How is AI revolutionizing the consulting and advisory sectors? If this is a question that you have in the age of AI, how all these things are changing. Welcome to this episode 86 of Extra AI, where we delve into this transformative question with our esteemed guest, Juergen Lindner, the co-founder of Evise.ai. And this is your host, Raghuvan. So in today's episode, Juergen will share his expert insights on how AI tools and analytics are reshaping consultancy practices, advisory practices, enhancing the decision-making processes, and optimizing client outcomes. We'll explore the unique challenges and opportunities that AI presents in this consulting world, advisory world, and also discuss the various strategies for integrating AI effectively into and to drive the innovation and the value. A brief background about Juergen. I worked with Juergen when he was in SAP, briefly. Uh, Juergen comes from a rich background. He's worked in companies like SAP, Oracle, and very senior positions. He's a tech executive, he's an investor, he's a CMO, and now of course, he's a advisory board member, and of course, now he's a co-founder of Evise.ai. So join us for a deep dive into the fascinating intersection of AI and consulting and advisory with Juergen Lindner on Extra AI podcast. Whether you are a professional in the industry or just curious about how the future of AI in business, and this episode will promise you to offer some very valuable perspectives and actionable insights. As always, you'll find more interesting information at the end of the podcast. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast conversation. All right, welcome back to our Extra AI podcast series. And as we have been doing in this season 9, we've been doing video podcasts. And today I have a guest, Mr. Juergen Lindner, and we are going to talk about consulting in the age of AI and how you can do it with Evise. Welcome on board, Juergen.
Thanks for having me, Raghu.
So before we get into the conversation, Juergen, I wanted to maybe ask you a couple of questions about your backstory or your personal or a professional story.
Yeah.
About how you got into AI or machine learning or AI or all these kind of things. I know there is a lot happening out there.
You're absolutely right. There's a lot happening, and I don't think I was predestined for AI in general. But I mean, as most of the audience can likely take from my German name and accent, I had almost of my educational upbringing in Germany. Did then a classical MBA type of study in Germany as well, and had 2 internships that sort of serendipitously shaped my life. One was implementing SAP software at a mid-sized corporation. And the other one I took in California, actually at a real estate broker. So completely foreign, but for me, the experience abroad was so much more important. And right out of the MBA studies, I consulted SAP, became very vocal where I found the product just didn't cut it at that point in time. And eventually, I think SAP just had it with me, and they said, okay, if you're so opinionated, why don't you become a product manager? And I said, okay, that sounds like a good challenge to have. Did that 2 years out of the Germany office, and then we had, as you know, Raghu, like the spin-out frenzy with SAP markets and portals and everything, where we first met. So moved over to Silicon Valley in 2000, actually. Continued on a product management part, but more and more drifting towards outbound enablement, ecosystem, marketing type of roles. Ran sales operations for a while as well. Did a shift from applications to infrastructure as well. And in 2016, got a call from Mark Hurd's office, where he said, look, we have a cloud product that we think is superior, but the market just doesn't appreciate it. Can you help us? And I said, okay, the arch enemy in red, that's going to be interesting. After 16 years of SAP, but it was a great journey. Learned a lot along the way. And it was 5.5 years run where I headed strategy for the cloud applications and also became their CMO for the cloud applications. Then took a sabbatical, and now I've rolled up my sleeves in the AI space to your point, and being a founder for the company which we call Evise.ai. I mean, to your point, how did I get in AI? I think it started when I was working at Oracle, to be honest, because a lot of customers ask, how do we use AI?
Right.
And we needed to have an answer as to how it's baked directly into the application experience versus being it yet just another add-on,
Right.
which there are a lot of use cases in the market right now. So I fell deeply and passionately in love to see which business processes are impacted. Of course, being a technology geek at heart, I always wanted to understand it as well, to be credible in front of customers and have meaningful CIO conversations. But it's not by background that I'm an AI specialist. I didn't study it. I'm not an IT guy per se, but for me, it was always interesting to see what is the impact on the human-machine interaction and which business processes can fundamentally be reinvented and done differently through AI, IoT, blockchain. So I love them all somewhat equally.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's an amazing journey, Jürgen. And like you mentioned, I know you're not coming from the IT background or from the technology as per background, but the business background. I think this is where eventually you see a lot of these technologies evolving. And we know if you kind of have these four-layer stack, starting with the bottom layer, the chips, where all the wave and boom is happening. Then you have the foundation model, and then you have the dev tools or the platform. But on the top is where the application space or the business application space sits in. And that is where exactly having a conversation like a leader like you uh, kind of triggers the people in understanding how the business applications and how the end businesses can leverage AI using it. Any particular Gen AI innovation in the current space or in the current, for the last 1.5 years, we've been focusing on. We all have been off by that you are more intrigued or interested.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll go one step back. I think oftentimes when I was explaining AI to customers, they always said, "Oh my God, it's this new thing." And I said, "No, it's not. You're being exposed to it and you just don't know it." And I think a perfect example is typically so a very personal example, I moved houses when I was at Oracle.
Right.
And after about 2 or 3 days on my iPhone, I had a very different notification, right? Because the iPhone was recognizing a new pattern. I had a different driving direction, right? So it's very interesting to see how pattern recognition, machine learning at its best, is something that we take for granted and really don't bucket into this AI trend so much because it is so naturally integrated into the experience that a lot of customers or clients use it without even knowing it. I think generative AI for me is, I was just blown away that I do think when OpenAI came out, I do think it was the catalyst of understanding the potential implications. So everyone all of a sudden could interact for the first time very seamlessly with an algorithm. And I would say just about anyone I talked to was just blown away, basically saying, "Oh my God, we're so much further along than we thought that we would be." And it was equally intimidating to, I think, a lot of folks, right? Because it triggered an angst effect for sure. But at the same point in time, I think folk are starting to realize when to use those type of applications. And it's not doom or gloom. I think it's this hybrid that folks really need to get their heads around because it can accelerate a lot of those mundane tasks, those repetitive type of tasks, and reorient towards completely new value creation. I mean, there's this study, I think McKinsey had it or so, or Gartner, I think McKinsey, but it's like 4.4 trillion of new GDP to be created. I mean, it's mind blowing, right? And I think the race is on right now to really capture this, but every company right now is in a state of, I would say, experimentation versus full frontal commitment. And a lot of companies right now out there are focusing on infrastructure, like getting large language models perfected, RAG technologies optimized, all those type of things. And yes, I'm a user of that as well.
Right.
But I rather have the conversations with clients as to which business use cases can we package entirely differently, maybe eradicate in its entirety and reassemble anew. And that's what we're doing at our company as well. We just took a completely new look as to how a new reality of receiving advice could look like in the age of AI.
Beautiful. I completely echo with your thoughts and the way I think the technology is progressing and growing leaps and bounds. I would definitely want to come back and have a deeper conversation. Let us take a quick break and come back and get into the real nitty-gritty details of what you guys are doing. And
Sure.
sounds very interesting.
Great.
I know we are just getting into embarking into an interesting conversation out there. So in this context of advising and consulting, I know there are a lot of new technologies coming in here, and obviously there is a lot of enthusiasm out there, but at the same time, there is a lot of caution because for the enterprises, it's not, for enterprise firm, it is a bit different than a consumer firm. Because here the complexity goes one more level because you have also have to deal with your not only the customer but also the customer's customer. So in this context, I believe advising and consulting gets even more important. I know you're maybe what are the typical challenges that you are seeing before we talk about what you guys are doing?
Let me answer that in a way that maybe makes it extremely conclusive as to why I feel so passionate about it. Because I don't come with a consulting background per se.
Right.
But when I was taking a sabbatical, I was doing a lot of those expert network type of consultation, like Guidepoint, Alpha Sites, all those type of things. And of course, you get to interact with a lot of interesting companies. But I found the process in itself is just extremely cumbersome and extremely costly for the party that actually triggers the request, right? So I know that if I can charge an hourly rate of $1,000 to $1,500 an hour, I know that the customer pays 6 to 7 times that price. And I said, that's sort of perverted. In the age of technology where we are, there should be an easier way to gain access to this knowledge where you can test drive individuals based on pre-recorded type of knowledge. And then if you decide, okay, that's worth my while, then I engage with this person, but maybe at a discounted rate. So that was the initial idea. But then we found when we were talking to consulting companies, actually, that they have very fundamental issues. And this has to do with knowledge management, right? So I do think generative AI is godsend if applied properly to capture knowledge and to make it accessible at scale to those who need it. And a very simple example is that you have typically senior consultants and you have junior consultants. Now, the problem is, how do you transfer knowledge between senior and junior consultants, right? I mean, either you take them out of the revenue-prone project for training type of purposes of junior, but this is not necessarily something they want to do. Or you have to loan your junior resources at discounted rates, which you also don't want to do. Right. So one of the use cases we're working with consultancies is really about making sure that any project knowledge anyone can record themselves is packaged up and can be made accessible infinitely at scale to anyone who needs it. Sounds super simple. It's not, as you know, right? I mean, it's all has to do with the format of the data typically, right? Is it structured? Is it a PowerPoint? Is it an MP4 file? Whatever it is, but we make sure that the ingestion is seamless and that the retrieval of the information can be tied to personas, to knowledge groups who need to have this type of things, or even can be externally monetized. So generative AI for us was just a tremendous catalyst. And we found a lot of use cases now within consulting companies, for example, where they do proposal management. And we're working with one company, for example, they can do 6 to 10 of those proposals a year based on their headcount constraints. One proposal goes for approximately 100K. And now with our technology, we think we can scale it to 30 or 40 a year. I mean, think of the implication it has from a revenue perspective, right? So it is something where we didn't think of those use cases initially necessarily, but as a startup, you discover very quickly in client conversations as to how you can add a lot of value very quickly by being extremely nimble and galvanizing around use cases. And then, of course, we also see turnover of employees, right? I mean, how do you retain this knowledge in a company? Super critical, for example. And what excites us tremendously, and I'm not sure if the world is ready for that yet, Orago, is that you can monetize those interactions, meaning it's almost like an avatar-based consulting engagement, right? Where we're testing the waters right now as to how ready clients are to really engage with consultancies on this avatar basis. We don't think it's either or. We do think it's hybrid and complementary. For initial advice, for understanding how can this consultancy help me? Who are the experts I need to talk to? There we can shave off so much time, so much money in the exploration phase that we're seeing a lot of interest right now for really test driving this capabilities and monetizing those interactions as a new business model very differently as well.
So you are solving a very interesting problem in the current space where there's a lot of technology out there, there's a lot of questions out there, and there are a lot of experts sitting out there. But doing this kind of mapping and managing that in an appropriate fashion, of course, the big consulting opportunities or the big consulting firms, they have their own platforms and they have their own networks. But I believe you are trying to hit a sweet spot where how a normal consultant, who is many of these freelance consultants, who can make a bit more money or a bit more work at a easier pace, and of course using a proper technology or proper platform. But then at the same time, you're also trying to solve the problems from these bigger firms where they want to have first an understanding of the problem before they can employ somebody or get somebody on. It's a beautiful thing. So maybe I would want to take one step back and now understand how or where Evise is predominantly playing a role here. What is your, I know you have briefly explained about what you guys are trying to do, but if you can highlight a few things about the overall mission statement and who are your end users, and maybe a few things around that.
Yeah, so Evise.ai is really, our mission statement is to change the world of consulting and advisory. So pretty ambitious statement for sure, but how we are approaching it, to your point, Raghu, is by basically saying we're not boiling the ocean on both ends. We're really focusing right now on having our platform. It's a turnkey platform that can be deployed as a white label offering by any consultancy right now. And we're having a lot of conversations with large professional services organizations in some of the largest global software vendors as well, but also boutique software consultancies, that do not have the prowess to what you described earlier to do all of that stuff themselves. They are intrigued by AI and generative AI, but for them to start such a project internally would pretty much require they take consultants off the street from revenue type of project, right? So this is where this turnkey nature of our platform for them is very intriguing by basically saying, look, I mean, we become the service provider for your AI capabilities. And to your point, yes, there are large, like an Accenture, for example, by all means, they have enough of innovation capacity to help themselves, but there's so many companies right now who are not in that space. And this is where the sweet spot for us is right now. But so we're really helping them with this internal and external knowledge transfer. We're helping them by really making sure that they have a possibility to create anytime consulting capacity with this approach. We also give them the possibility to create proposals and digital transformation plans in a very prompted type of fashion. So you can think like a PowerPoint and document type of builder, where they can have their own methodology and the customer can just simply click and they get an output document that typically takes them weeks or months to assemble, done in minutes. That is a huge savings. And then, of course, we think we can really add to completely new revenue streams that they haven't thought about and new market segments that they can enter. Plus, being a startup ourselves, I think a lot of those companies are in a state where they're looking to see, okay, what's the next growth phase? And if you don't have an articulated AI strategy, well, good luck, right? So I do think we also give them the possibility to have an AI story in their business plan with our turnkey type of approach, because to your point earlier, this technology is so tremendously fast-paced. Whatever is a cool LLM today might be completely obsolete tomorrow. And you might be locking yourself into a technology stack so easily based on experimentation, where I do think you want to outsource some of that risk of the technology pace to someone whose sole dedication is precisely that.
True. I think you rightfully mentioned that, right? I think gone are those days where you have to wait years or even months that something new comes up. But now the innovation is happening at a very fast pace. And of course, people are also kind of getting geared up and getting trained at a faster pace. But at the same time, how do you take this and kind of implement, or how does the businesses understand? So when you talk about your platform, you're focusing on building a platform where these consulting firms can come in and use your platform and build maybe an end-to-end story so that the experts can easily leverage. And of course, these consulting firms can take this and the experts can easily leverage the space. Yeah. So you will obviously in this space, I believe there is, like you've mentioned, yeah, of course, the big players will have their own innovation. And like you are creating a platform out there and making sure that the small players or the other small and medium consulting firms can realistically use your services. Are you also using, or what kind of AI? I know we don't need to go into the confidentiality details, but what kind of AI you are using in your platform to make sure that it can realistically provide benefits that are not out there for these small players?
No, so based on the hiring profile that we did, we have a CTO who comes from AWS, has worked in several small AI startups as well. So we have a strong foundation with an AWS infrastructure, classical vector DB type of approach and RAG as a technology to go there. And then for the facilitation of client interactions, Zoom integrations, Calendly integrations, Stripe integrations, all those type of things to really make sure that we can properly monetize, interact properly. But it's a fairly straightforward stack at this point in time, and we're using OpenAI for baseline information as well. But I mean, we take the privacy of data extremely serious. For us, it was always, we never wanted to have reliance on open models simply because of the scrutiny, obviously. It gives you, we use it as complementary information, should there not be enough internal training data. But it's, for us, it's a human-led generative AI approach. Sounds maybe weird, but for us, it was very important that the human is in the loop of the training, that you're very clear as to what goes into the model, and that you're always in clear and crisp understanding as to what is the source material. So the citation of sources for us was very critical. And whenever we pull information from a public model, it is also properly flagged so that the recipient of the information is always fully aware, oh my God, okay, this is internal information, okay? And this is potentially external augmentation that we do. But to my point earlier, I mean, we also found that certain language models perform better in certain use cases. Sometimes Claude is better, sometimes OpenAI is better, sometimes Gemini is better. And we want to have a distinct agnostic approach, right? Where we are independent of those type of models, because the client also might have preferences. They might have already started something with OpenAI and then it needs to fit into their architecture somehow. Or they have a strong preference that maybe they are in Germany and something with like Alpha or whatever it is, right? So I do think that is where, from a design perspective, you want to be extremely mindful to have an openness in your stack and not tying yourself to just one technology, because as we discussed earlier, it just changes weekly, monthly, at a pace that I've never seen before in technology.
So you're building your stack in such a way that it can be open and like you can leverage depending on the customer or the client requirements. They can easily switch over whichever large language model, or not only the LLMs, but even the hyperscaler platforms out there, or all the other different infrastructure related aspects. Those things could also be easily managed.
To clarify, I don't think we can easily switch out the AWS type of thing right now. I mean, base model independence, absolutely. And we will see. I mean, we're a small startup in the very early innings of our existence, right? So by all means, we keep an open ear, because I mean, Oracle OCI is a great infrastructure. Azure is a great infrastructure. It just happens that from a founder perspective, right, we had the head start pretty much, and the existing network and the pace that we could have on AWS.
Good. I know you've Evise.ai is pretty new. I believe you've been maybe a few months, a couple of.
It's a year. It's a year now. We started in February 23.
Yeah, February. So we don't need to talk about the names of the customers or any confidentiality material, but any particular example that you would like to quote, how you have increased the revenue or realistically help the client in realizing the potential of using this platform.
So I'll give you two examples. One is with one of the largest software providers in the world right now, where we are making their ecosystem development stronger with our platform. And the use case is actually fairly simple. They have so much documentation that they typically extend to the partner ecosystem, but it is in a classical format, right? You have a shared drive potentially, or they download the assets somewhere from a website or something, from a partner portal. You cannot really meaningfully interact very quickly with this set of information. So either you download it and you read it, but it's not curated for a generative AI type of experience, right? And so we become this turnkey generative AI experience platform for them to enable their partner ecosystem at scale. So that is super interesting, because I mean, that's such a vast opportunity between the tier 1 partners and tier 2 partners and other type of things, right? And we're currently in a proof of concept type of phase and it looks super promising, actually. I mean, we are super happy with the output. Of course, there's certain data formats that we need to train still on, but I mean, in general, it's just such a quantum leap forward how partners can be enabled to help this software provider sell on their behalf software solutions. It's brilliant. Makes a lot of sense, actually. And then the other use case is a smaller company. I think I was hinting towards that sort earlier. They're a boutique consultancy, but they have, for example, they started with the internal knowledge transfer. That was super intriguing to them, because they have this problem of upskilling junior consultants. But for them, a direct revenue impact was this proposal management, where we can auto create, based on their methodology, a digital playbook for any account, which is typically a very collaborative project between the client and a consultant. And we've brought it to a point where it took them typically 4 to 6 weeks, and now it's a matter of 20 minutes.
Wow.
And they can do that now at scale, right? So they can do beyond the 10 that they could do before a year. Now they can do 20, 30, 40. We don't know. The sky could be the limit potentially. We don't want to go overboard, but I mean, it is just extremely liberating that you can shrink something so dramatically from weeks and months into 20 minutes. And that is for us call it an ego boost. I do think it's a confirmation that what we have initially designed scales and is open for clients to have their own spin on it. Because I mean, we have our own methodology potentially to guide such a prompted experience, but ultimately every consultancy prides themselves with being a very personalized and very catered service to their clients. So we want to make sure that they can personalize our solutions and really have a great experience with their clients, hopefully.
Beautiful. I think just you gave some beautiful, amazing examples. I think so. I have this question, right? I know you are now predominantly your market. Is it focused mainly in North America, or I know there are a lot of regulation related aspects too, because this is going to be a bit more trickier in other countries, whether when you go to Middle East or Asia Pacific, Europe specifically. How are you planning to handle this, or are you currently focused in one particular region and planning to expand further, or any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to laugh simply because I mean, our initial conception was basically to say we just do it in North America for now.
Right.
But as a startup, you take traction wherever it hits you, right? So it is something where we see traction on this side of the ocean, so on North America for sure. But we also see traction in Europe, and we're talking also to a couple of companies right now in Asia as well. So to your point precisely, you want to be extremely cognizant that there are different regulations, different paces of adoptions, different infrastructural needs, sovereignty needs, and everything, right? So you don't want to stretch yourself too thin from the beginning. So if you ask me what's our ideal client profile, North America and Europe. And Europe have just been apped the ante, right? From a legislation perspective, of course. So I do think it's good for us to have client adoption there as well, because it will force us to think very profoundly as to what type of data sets need to be protected in which way that other regions will benefit from. So I like the tough benchmark. Whereas, so yeah, I think European right now is the strictest that we have accounted so far. But I do think it forces us from a discipline perspective to think through topics that will come up in the US as well very quickly.
Beautiful. I completely echo with your thoughts. Yes, I think when you talk about Europe, I think there are a lot more regulations and a lot more privacy-related aspects and restrictions that you need to take care. And once you can solve that, I think if I say Europe is at one end, I think Asia Pacific will be on the other end. At some point of time, if you get to go there, the problems or the challenges that you might see there, again, there are huge consulting opportunities there out there. I don't need to tell you, but of course, that's again a completely different ballgame, I believe, and how you can deal. Or I know you are currently focusing on North America and Europe. Any thoughts about?
It also has to do with our rather distributed leadership setup, to be honest, right? I mean, we're not the typical company where we're just located in one type of spot. We have a co-founder in Germany, we have a co-founder in England. So we, by nature, have a very diverse type of thought in how we should approach it. And that is where I hope it works to our advantage, obviously, of having this global mindset right off the bat and not just starting in one market and then being caught cold by the regulatory type of thresholds that you need to meet and enter the market. So that is why I like being exposed to the very stringent European type of thought process. And I'm happily liberated to work in other markets that potentially have not lived up to the standards of the EU regulations.
Beautiful. I know this topic of consulting and advisory in the age of AI. This is a very interesting topic. The reason why is that with with the inception of generative AI, if I see AI as the back office, generative AI is predominantly the front office, which makes everybody understand how you can use the technology. And this is where you will see a lot of entrepreneurs popping up out with, because you will be getting a lot of generative tools out there, AI tools out there. And this is where the consulting experience or advisory roles will increase abundantly. And this is where I think you're getting there at the right time, I believe. So I'm now coming to the most interesting or the $1 million or the $1 billion question, I say, as part of the podcast.
Okay.
I know this is every firm, I think they have some unique factor, I think, or some differentiation factor. Maybe if you would like to term this in one word or one sentence or one phrase or whatever, what is the uniqueness that you're trying to build away from the competition? I know there will be a huge competition. There is a huge competition there with the big firms. And obviously there will be some other unicorns or some other startups coming up in this space. But what do you foresee? How do you try to differentiate yourself?
I'm not sure if I can answer it in one sentence, Raghu, but I do think what I'm sensing is there is a lot of excitement for sure around generative AI. I think it has opened the eyes from an interaction paradigm perspective as to what is possible in order to accelerate business processes, change them completely, or simply just get an initial guidance. And with that, I do think we're going to enter an era where the AI conversation is not going to be so much just an infrastructure topic, like chips and large language models and everything, but really shifting very quickly into vertical applications. And I do think, to your point, that is where we see at this point in time, and this advantage can be very short-lived in a startup world, this turnkey approach to a very distinct business problem as a big advantage right now, because yes, you can piecemeal this together for any company. It's not that you cannot do that, but I do think the threshold, the skill set access that you need in order to really get this done quickly is intimidating. And I think folks underestimate. I think it's very easy to do a proof of concept by stringing together a couple of open source type of things, or swipe your credit card and you have an open AI license and then you string it together for a POC. But what we are seeing is those projects tend to die on a vine very quickly because they're not built for sustainability, right? Within a business process application. And this is where we think companies will start to realize that it makes sense to partner with someone like us to have this sustained effort on making sure that their infrastructure is always the right one. And they can really focus on getting their business processes massively accelerated, monetized, and just delightfully different. So this is where I think our differentiation really kicks in. We're not geeking out on one technology over the other. We really do focus on the business problem and orchestrate a complete turnkey solution for those companies, where otherwise they have to do into self-experimentation or piecemeal type of thing. And there are studies where this can easily be millions of dollars a year, right? And for us, it's a very simple, safe subscription type of model, very predictable, and you always are ensured that you're on the latest, most relevant technology that can be applied to your business problem.
I think there's a lot of potential out there. And like, I think since you guys are coming up from not only as platform, you're not only building a platform, but also you're providing these kind of turnkey solutions to these enterprises, and maybe you can partner in future with some of these big firms or enterprises.
Yeah, and
There's
that's
a lot
purpose
of
built.
yeah.
I mean, for us, it's really purpose built. We wanted to make sure that we have something that is, you deploy it and you get an instant value out of it, right? So that the heavy lifting of the architecture is taken out of the equation. You can really focus on training with what you think is relevant. So you have complete control over the data sets, which is a big question for a lot of companies where trust into the technology is still a major issue, right? We make sure that they have utmost leverage as to which data sets are being used, utmost transparency, where the information is sourced from, that you don't have this hallucination type of angst or other type of things. So you are in complete control what type of data you feed it with, who has access to it. And you can be almost knowledge entities. It can be a person, it can be a group of people, it can be a client. So you can build an architecture that's almost like swarm intelligence of generative AI.
Right, right. I think I like the aspect of building a knowledge entity, whether it's a person, or an entity, or a group. I think that is where I think the value lies, and how you're building it, and how you can make it available to people, maybe for, like you mentioned, a subscription fee or whatever, whatever the service.
Yeah, because I mean, you have the same issues like what you had before, authorization concepts, all those type of things, right? There's so much focus in conversations right now. Oh my God, we need to build an LLM, just dump everything in there. But you will have the same access restrictions, the same type of sensitivity of data that is either tailored to personas. And that is why we make sure from an architectural perspective, you can make it as granular or as wide as you want to see it. And yes, there can be a super persona. We call that super persona Ava, by the way. So we have that concept as well, but I do think it's one of many use cases where a lot of companies are not willing to go for this super persona just yet.
Yes.
They want to test it in certain field instances. This is why those knowledge entities for us, I think, is super critical to be from an architectural design.
Right, right. I completely agree with that concept of a super persona, where you will have not only the knowledge driven, but intent driven based out of the context and how you can provide. So I know we are getting to the coffee hour with our conversation. Very interesting. One question before we get into the key takeaways. One other question. I know what would be those innovations, the generative AI innovations or the AI innovations that might make more sense for you with all this hype and the wave going on, which would help you or your firm do much better?
Yeah, I'm super intrigued right now, Raghu, by multimodal type of AI. Naturally, I guess, because I mean, we are faced with so many information constructs. Sometimes it's a PDF, sometimes it's a table, sometimes it's an image, sometimes it's something else, right? So we really think, I think the AI world at large still needs to evolve into really getting that properly done. And that is going to be something that's not going to take years, that's going to take months. And you need to will display an utmost flexibility to see what is the best tool for ingestion there, for staging, for chunking, for all those type of things, right? And that is where we're having a very close eye on the market right now. So the evolution of multimodal type of data ingestion capabilities and really making sure that this is even more seamless than it is right now. I think the other one I would say is explainable AI likely, right? Because I do think more than ever, scrutiny is going to be extended towards the recommendations you come up with. So unless from a conceptual design, you're very clear as to how certain recommendations were formed, which data assets potentially were more merged for an answer, you will always have this angst element that you're leaning too far over your skis in the answer, or you might be extending incorrect information to someone, right? So I do think this entire notion of explainable AI have transparency and trust into the recommendation is for us, I think, the two ones we're most excited about, I'd say, right? So I do think, of course, we're going to look at every LLM evolution and alter our approach as to what it does. I think we're going to see more and more scrutiny into what type of training data has been used, right? That clients are going to be applying. But since we have outsourced and heightened that risk a little bit on the client themselves, right? They train the model, they create those knowledge entities as to how they see fit. We're not at the same level of exposure or scrutiny potentially than OpenAI or a Claude or other type of public models. We use them complementary, but not as the main source of recommendation.
Right. I think you brought up a very interesting point about explainable AI and trust. Though there is a lot of research out there on how you can realistically explain a particular aspect, there are still, and I think in the aspect that you are working on, the consulting and advisory role, where you're trying to get of course, you are focusing more on the platform and the turnkey solutions, but the clients that use your solution, they would be more interested in understanding how well I can explain that I'm getting the right expert onto the net. So that is where doing that actual matching and other things, that's going to be very interesting.
It's super going to be, as you said, it's going to be super interesting. I do think there are certain use cases where clients are going to be absolutely okay having a generated response. But at a given point in time, I think this human trust element is not going to go away anytime soon. So this is why we're designing for a hybrid type of thing where not only do you know where the recommendations come from and how they were synthesized, you also know who the experts behind those statements. And then you say, hey, I would really love to talk to this person right now. And that process alone typically can take forever to be initiated, right? And we can make that more or less instant now. So this is why we are having a very attractive offering for consulting solutions to make their expert bench accessible to clients almost instantaneously. And the mundanity of the initial business initiation can be taken almost entirely out of the equation, because there are a lot of repetitive type of questions they answer. It shouldn't be the case. They should be focusing on value for the customer. And that is where we're super excited about generative AI being a catalyst for an interaction paradigm that was not possible before.
Beautiful. Amazing having this conversation with you. Any closing remarks or highlights or key takeaways for the audience?
I mean, anyone who's listening to the podcast, by all means, feel free to reach out in any type of capacity. We like feedback. We're early in our stage. Visit our website, give us feedback. If you should happen to be a consultancy, give us a call. Let's have this conversation. But we're just a bunch of tremendously passionate folks right now trying to solve a problem which we think can dramatically alter how advice is extended, can be received, and can be made more affordable so that more companies can succeed out there. So that's our mission.
Beautiful. I like the aspect that you're saying, how advisory can be made more accessible so that more companies can succeed. Beautiful statement. And thanks for your time.
Raghu,
amazing
it was my
having
pleasure.
this conversation.
Absolutely my pleasure, Raghu. Thanks for having me on.
All right, and so that brings us to the close of an insightful episode 86 of Extra AI. Firstly, a very big thank you to Juergen Lindner, the co-founder of Evise.ai, for joining us today and sharing his deep expertise and insights on the impact of AI on consulting and advisory services. Juergen's perspective have illuminated the significant transformations AI is driving in this sector, offering both challenges and incredible opportunities for growth and innovation. We also extend our heartfelt appreciation to you all, our audience, for tuning in and engaging with our discussions. Your interest and participation are what makes our podcast a vibrant platform for exploring the vast possibilities of AI. As always, I'll be tagging Mr. Juergen on the LinkedIn post. And if you have any further questions, you can directly reach out to Juergen. Alternatively, you can also reach out to me, Raghu Banda, on my LinkedIn profile or on my other social media channels like the Twitter or X handle, Banda. Obviously, you can go to my website, our website, extraai.com, xtrawai.com, and you'll find humongous amount of other episodes and other information in the realm of AI. So stay tuned well, and stay glued to our Extra AI for our upcoming episodes, where we will cover a variety of exciting topics, whether it is including AI-driven content writing or AI as a force of good. So there are many more interesting discussions that can enrich your understanding of how AI continues to influence and reshape the different sectors and societal spaces. If you haven't subscribed to Extra AI podcast yet, now is the perfect time to do so. By subscribing, you will ensure you never miss out on our in-depth exploration of all things AI. Thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you to more engaging and informative episodes of Extra AI. Until then, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're tuning in. Happy predicting the future with AI technologies. This is your host, Raghu Banda, signing off. Thank you and bye-bye.